Brahmarishi Vashishta and Brahmarishi Vishwamitra, they worship Lord Ram. According to them, Lord Ram is like a bridge. And he is a bridge that helps you cross from this world to the other world, from the material world to the spiritual world.
जय धारी माँ, शुभा जी, हरे कृष्णा, जय सिया राम, शुभा जी, हरे कृष्णा.
Very happy to be with both of you all again.
Hare Krishna. So good to be back with you. Thank you.
मम्मी जय धारी माँ.
जय धारी.
आइए जुड़िए, हमारी ऑडियंसेस का स्वागत है. आप सबके इष्ट को नमो. हमारी ऑडियंसेस हमारे साथ जुड़े, ये सब आपके लिए है. आज चर्चा करेंगे थिंक बिग टू विन के 7वें चैप्टर में. चैप्टर है एनिहिलेशन एंड रिजुविनेशन. आइए चर्चा शुरू करते हैं. प्रश्न उत्तर शुरू करते हैं. शुभा जी, चैप्टर की शुरुआत होती है, रावण खड़ा है, he saw it all gone and he's ordering the sealing of the gates and he's ordering his best men to come and fight the war. Shubha ji, can shutting the gates and ordering the best men to come ramifications of karma को कैसे prevent करेगा वो? He's trying to defy the laws of nature. Does it work? जी शुभा जी.
Ideally, the defiance of the law of nature never works. But the law of karma is a very flexible law, in the sense that nothing that is there in the laws of this world are very rigid and fixed. There are people that have the ability to mold many of the laws according to their needs. But how much the law bends, it's very much person dependent. There are some people who have such a strong desire to do something good for the world. They defy all laws and they try to do best for society, and they actually manage it. It seems to be logically and from a physical point of view impossible. But because they are so determined that the laws become flexible for them. Of course, there are some people who use that determination for the wrong purpose. When that determination is used for the wrong purpose, sometimes it seems to be working, but it doesn't always work in the long run. Usually, the example is given of a catapult. When you want to hit a stone, you pull the catapult backwards, and the more further you stretch it, the harder the stone hits. So life is exactly like that. So sometimes when a bad person is doing something and he's doing something really wrong, it's like the catapult being pulled backwards and backwards and backwards. You don't see a reaction immediately. It doesn't mean the reaction is not going to come. In fact, when it hits much, much harder, basically. So the law of karma is a very precisely governed law. Yes, there is flexibility in it. Yes, there is an ability for a human being to actually intervene and change some aspects of the law of karma according to one's determination. But all that is very strongly connected with the intentions. And all that is also very strongly connected with the kripa factor, which is the mercy factor of the Lord. So sometimes the Lord, out of His mercy towards some person, decides to uh, relax a certain amount of that law, but that doesn't make it a general principle. And there are some people who try to take advantage of that mercy and try to do what they want to do. But you should remember that the law, just because it is going backwards, it doesn't mean it's not going to hit you at some point. And when it hits bad, basically.
तो शुभा जी, एक बात तो तय है ना कि सब प्रभु के हाथ में है. Everything
Yes.
is in their hand.
Actually, there are three doers. For anything in this world, there are three doers. The Bhagavad Gita talks about these three doers. One is the person, second is the laws of nature, and third is God, the hand of God. These are three factors that govern every action. Just like, for example, just to give you a simple example, if I sit in a car in a taxi, and I tell the taxi driver, take me to some location, like say for example, Churchgate. So you sit in the car, the taxi driver drives you all the way to that particular location, and you get off the taxi, and you say thank you very much, and you're walking away. The taxi fellow says, hey, you have to pay me money. The person says, hey, you also drove the taxi and came. You also enjoyed the wind. You also enjoyed the ride. Why should I pay? No, that's not how it works. The desire to go there was expressed by the person, right? So in this analogy, the person is the atma, the soul, who takes a decision. The taxi is the physical body, the laws of nature, you can call it, and the driver is the Paramatma, God, who is within us. So when the Atma expresses a desire, saying that I want to go here, the Paramatma first sanctions the desire, whether you deserve what you desire. When the Paramatma sanctions it, puts a tick, then the taxi, which is the laws of nature, carries out the instruction of Paramatma and takes you to a particular destination. So now who is a doer? All three are doers. The soul is a doer because the soul expressed the desire first of all. If that soul had not expressed the desire, the laws of nature wouldn't have acted, and the Paramatma wouldn't have sanctioned. But if the soul expresses desire and the Paramatma doesn't sanction it, then the laws of nature won't carry out the order. So the Paramatma is the second doer. But if the soul is desiring and the Paramatma is sanctioning, but actually things don't happen, then you're still stuck in the same place. So the laws of nature also are doer. So all three of them are doers at that level. So we have some level of contribution. Paramatma, God, has some level of contribution, and the laws of nature have their own level of contribution, and that's how any action happens.
जी, ये सब करने में pride plays a very important role. You have written, pride walks alone, but pride can be defeated only when God steps in. And the Lord does step in. In this chapter, it clearly shows that they all thought they were bigger and larger than the mightiest force, than the Lord. Ji Shubha ji.
This section of the Ramayan is so beautiful, actually. It talks so deeply about the concept of pride. There is a particular section during the war, Ram-Ravan war, when Kumbhakarna comes out to fight against the Ram's army. So when Kumbhakarna comes out, he comes out alone. Most other warriors, when they come out with a huge army behind them to support them. But Kumbhakarna refuses to take anyone along with him. He says, I'll go alone. That's the nature of pride. The nature of pride is that it wants to walk alone. The nature of pride is it can't handle sharing credit with anybody. It can't handle the idea that I depend on anybody else. So Kumbhakarna preferred to walk in alone. Why? simply because he didn't want to share his credit with anybody else. And that's the nature of pride. So if you find proud people, they have an inability to work in a team. They can't function in teams. They, they like to be a one-man show. Why they like to be a one-man show? It's not that they can do everything. It's just simply that they don't want to share credits with anybody else. They don't want to share the fact that I'm not responsible for the victory alone. So Kumbhakarna comes alone. And first time when Kumbhakarna comes and the first attack happens, all the Vanaras rush towards Kumbhakarna and Kumbhakarna thoroughly defeats them. And after some time, the Vanaras, when they realize we can't handle Kumbhakarna on our own, they come running back and Ram steps in the front. And all the Vanaras are behind Ram. So usually, when you're dealing with pride, it's very tough to defeat pride on your own. All other things you can actually handle on your own. You can handle lust, you can handle anger, you can handle envy, you can handle many of these bad qualities, vices on your own. But to handle pride, you need help from God. Because pride is the last snare of Maya. That's what it's called. Because after you have conquered everything else, you still have this one thought: I did it. That thought that I did it is the pride one. Is the thought of pride. So when somebody has really managed to control his senses, really managed to master his mind, really managed to perfect every other aspect of life, there is one last aspect left. The thought that, see how good I am. That's what pride is. And that makes you so lonely. And to deal with such a powerful pride, you need to keep God in the front and you are behind. So the idea that Ram is in the front and the Vanaras are behind, it simply means that the Vanaras can face pride only when God is in front of them. When they prioritize God in their lives.
शुभा जी, मैं आपसे भस्म लोचन के बारे में पूछना चाह रही हूँ। वो स्टोरी को आप शेयर करें, क्योंकि उसको उसी का चेहरा दिखाया गया था, and he turned to ashes. We have to first live with our own self. If we are not at peace with our own self, how do we face our own self every single day? Because when we see ourselves in the mirror and we are not at peace with our own self, isn't that similar to what happened with Bhasmalochan? Ji Shubha ji.
Bhasmalochan's story is about how your greatest enemy is yourself. The story is a very interesting story where Ravan sends this powerful demon named Bhasmalochan, who has the ability to burn down anyone with his eyes. So if he looks at anyone, they burn down. That's all. So Bhasmalochan came into the army with his eyes tied up, and when he walked in, the Vanaras didn't know what to expect till he opened his blindfold. The moment he opened his blindfold, whoever he saw burned to ashes. And it was a chaos in the Vanara army because everybody is hiding behind trees and behind rocks to somehow save themselves from Bhasmalochan's stares. And Bhasmalochan was indiscriminately burning everyone with his power of sight and vision and the ability to burn people down. At that point, when all the Vanaras were scared, they didn't know what to do. They were in total, utter chaos. That time, Hanumanji started running in another direction towards Lanka. So no one understood why Hanuman is running to Lanka. He actually ran into the Lanka. He climbed the wall, jumped into the palace of Lanka, and then after some time, he came out with holding something huge in his hands. And the Vanaras had no idea what he got from inside Lanka. Imagine jumping into the enemy camp and getting something from the enemy camp. And somehow Hanuman came right behind Bhasmalochan. Bhasmalochan was looking at everyone and burning them down. Hanuman comes right behind Bhasmalochan. Using his tail, Hanuman drops the mirror right in front of Basmalochan. That's what he had carried, a huge mirror. And Basmalochan, when he saw himself in the mirror, he burnt himself down. And that is how Basmalochan, his life ended, because in the mirror he saw his own reflection, and whatever he sees, he burns it down. Right. So that is how Basmalochan died. There are many understandings of the story. Of course, what we're talking about in this context is how sometimes one tends to become one's own enemy. So Basmalochan couldn't be destroyed by anybody else except himself. So there are so many of us, so many people who are so powerful and so effective, so efficient, so impactful. Nobody can destroy them except themselves. And unfortunately, it does happen that one does something silly, something stupid, something very, very uh, small, and that actually becomes a cause of destruction of oneself. It also when you talk about mirror, what does a mirror represent? The mirror also represents your self-image, the way you look at yourself. Not everyone is comfortable with what they see in the mirror. Some people, they see and they're very happy with what they see in the mirror. And there are others who see and they're not at all happy with what they see in the mirror. In fact, they become so uncomfortable that they burn themselves down. How many people we know who are having such a low self-esteem, such a low self-image, and struggling so badly because they're just not able to look at themselves healthily. So the mirror represents many things. In psychological terms, there is a concept which is known as, it's a socio-psychological concept which is known as a mirror image of oneself. You just look at your mirror, look at the mirror. You actually, every human being looks at you in a different way. Your mother looks at you in a particular way, and she calls you in a particular way. Your father looks at you in a particular way. Your friends look at you in a particular way. Your bosses may look at you in a particular way. So everyone who looks at you in a particular way, and the way your self-image is, how you look at yourself, is a byproduct of all those ways of other people looking at you, and that is how you start looking at yourself. So many people who have a very low self-esteem and a very low self-image are simply because of two reasons. One is the negative impact of many people telling them something bad about them. So if you keep calling a child stupid and lazy and less intelligent, over a period of time, the child actually starts believing that he's stupid, lazy, and less intelligent. So if you keep hearing negative feedback, that becomes in your self-image. And the second is when you have been dishonest with yourself, when you have broken some promise, when you have not acted authentic, then again you lose your own. You lose the ability to look at yourself properly. So Basmalochan, looking at himself in the mirror and burning himself down, represents all these things on a subtler and a deeper level for us.
Shubhaji, we all talk about peace of mind, but peace of conscience, peace of karma, peace of heart, peace of soul, why is that not a priority? माइंड मन को तो समझा लेंगे, सही किया. Peace of conscience, peace of the soul, that needs courage. जी शुभा जी.
We give a lot of importance to the mind because the mind dictates a lot of how we live in this world, how we think, how we behave, what we feel, what we will. Mind thinks a lot. But the role of intelligence is to discriminate right from wrong. The role of intelligence is to be determined. The role of intelligence is to think deeper. So the reason why we talk so much about mind is because mind is so overwhelmingly visible to us. because it's there all over. Every decision that we make is practically mind centric, and how many decisions we make is conscience centric. How many decisions we make is intelligence centric. How many decisions we make is based on the purity of the soul? Hardly any. The reason why most people keep talking about the mind is simply because the mind is so external. In the Gita, Krishna speaks about a very interesting concept. He says, use the mind to control the senses. Use the power of the intelligence to control the mind. And use the power of the soul to control the intelligence. It's very interesting in the order in which Krishna speaks, So he says, use the power of the mind to control the senses, because senses are external, right? What we see, what we hear, what we speak, what we smell, these are all external. So if you want to control the senses, control the mind first. The mind is like a reins, reins that control the horses, and the senses are like wild horses; they're going in all directions. So the mind has to be strong. The bridle, the reins have to be strong. But the reins by themselves can't do anything. The reins are in the hands of a chariot driver. And the driver is intelligence, chariot driver. And therefore he says, control the senses using the power of the mind, control the mind using the power of the intelligence. That's where the chariot driver comes in. The chariot driver, who's very powerful, can control the mind very powerfully. So the role of intelligence is decision making, determination, discrimination. The role of the mind is thinking, willing, feeling. The mind is all going to be always talking about what I think, what I feel, what I will. But the intelligence is going to be talking about right and wrong. And the intelligence can be empowered by the soul, by the pure spirit soul, which is Sachidananda, eternal, full of knowledge and full of bliss. And that is the sequence in which, so most people are stuck at the level of the mind because they don't know that there are two deeper levels that exist. So what you are talking about, the power of conscience, the power of discrimination, that's the deeper level. So we need to get there. But of course, if you're not even at that level of the mind, then you can't even go further. So at least that's the beginning.
Yes. So it's a journey. It's a journey, Shubhaji. Shubhaji, you go on to write. The motive behind the battle often determines the result of the battle. If motive is weak, the fight will be weaker. This is true for all battles, even the battles of life. Your motive and the way you fight the fight will determine the outcome, won't it? Ji Shubhaji.
Absolutely. That's why the why has to be more powerful than the how. A lot of people in this world are thinking about how can I achieve this. But before you go to think about how can you achieve this, you should first think about why should I achieve this. Because if you are very clear about why you want to achieve something, the how will somehow happen. The how will somehow fall in place. Unfortunately, most people, in fact, our entire education system is oriented towards how and what only. Hardly it helps us understand why. So if you look at Shivaji Maharaj, for example, Shivaji Maharaj, and you look at any of the great, powerful warriors and kings of the past, they have clarity about their why. Go Brahma iti Ayacha, the idea of protecting cows, Brahmanical culture, so powerful in Shivaji Maharaj's mind. That's his goal. His why was so clear. And because his why was so clear, he found so many how and whats. The kind of strategies that they made, unbelievable strategies. And none of those strategies have ever been done in the past. I mean, if you study many of the wars that Shivaji Maharaj won, they were impossible wars. Whether it is with Afzal Khan or whether it is so many of the wars in the mountains, almost impossible wars. If the focus was on the how, they would have struggled a lot. But because their focus was on the why, somehow they managed to find a way. Somehow they managed to find, way to get it done. The why empowers you. The why gives you clarity. And the why gives you a sense of purpose. There's a difference between a goal and a purpose. Goal is a way to achieve your purpose. Without having clarity of purpose, you having many goals doesn't make sense. So most people they make goals in life. But before you make your goal, first you should make your purpose. And then every goal that you make will lead you towards your purpose. And that's the difference between a why and a how. So the how is the goal, and the why is the purpose behind your goal. And that's why this idea of motives and this idea of understanding the deeper concept is so very important to focus on. And then the fights become much easier when your why is clear and the purpose is clear.
Shubhaji, what's the importance of sabra and sehen shakti? Sabra and sehen shakti when you're fighting the battles of life. Sehen shakti.
San Shakti from a English perspective, you can call it as patience, you can call it as perseverance. Yeah. If you just look at nature, you get a lot of um, understanding of San Shakti, a lot of understanding of patience. Nothing in nature happens fast. We're all in a world of fast speed internets. If the Wi-Fi stutters a little bit, we just lose patience, isn't it? For a few seconds, if we lose connectivity, we just start feeling something is wrong, isn't it? If the food delivery comes 5 minutes late, people just go crazy, and if the traffic signal doesn't work for a few more seconds, people just lose it, honking on and on and on. Why? Simply because we just have lost all our patience. And that's simply because we have become very far from nature. The natural way of life is a slow paced life. That's a natural way of life. You plant a seed, you can't expect the plant to grow the next day. It takes its own sweet time. Plant a coconut seed, 10 years, you just wait for the fruit to come up. Sometimes you plant a mango seed, 15 years. You may not even experience the mango yourself. Next generation will get it probably. So everything in nature has its own time. If you want rain, summer season, can't. Just have to wait. So the natural way of life is it pushes you towards being patient and developing a lot of science shakti. But the artificial way of life, it pushes you towards immediate results. It pushes you towards instant gratification. And anything that is instant also causes trouble also instantly, causes problems also instantly. How many problems are that the world is facing by because of fast food? Though it is so fastly available, it causes so much of complications, isn't it? How much trouble is being caused simply because of internet addiction today? Yeah. So if you look at psychology today, so many case studies of youngsters who are addicted to that speed of getting things, speed of achieving information. So that speed has its own problems. Perseverance and patience are not about not achieving what you want. It's just that when you achieve what you deserve to achieve at the time in which you deserve it, at the everything has its own time, right? For it to manifest powerfully. So when you have that kind of patience for it to manifest in its completeness, that's when you get the most healthy output. Simple example: when a child is born 1 month before it is due, the child has a lot of complications all through life. all through life, literally, just 1 month before when the child is born. So imagine what a big difference that 1 month of patience leads to. So sometimes, people lose patience in many aspects of life. It may be one day, it may be a few minutes, it may be a few hours, but that duration of that loss of patience leads to an implication that is lifelong. It lasts basically. So in wars, especially in a battle, where everything happens at quick pace, very quick, speed at which things happen. In such a situation, to be patient, it requires a lot of guts. Simple example: the Bhagavad Gita. The conches were blown. The battle is about to begin, and the Pandavas are waiting for this battle for so many years now. And when the battle is just about to begin, Arjun is asking questions. In that such a crucial juncture of life, Arjun has the patience to have a discussion for 45 minutes with Krishna. What an amazing exhibition of patience. And thousands of warriors waiting patiently for them to finish their discussion because they know that one person's decision is going to affect the entire war's outcome. That is the level at which the society used to function before. Unfortunately, the level at which we are living today, the speed at which we are living today, we don't allow us time to process. We don't allow ourselves time to understand what is happening. Before that, only we end up doing things, and that's what leads to a lot of complications. So, Sand Shakti, very important in the battle of life.
Shubhaji, what do you thirst for? What do you crave for in life? What do you thirst for? Is that is that going to decide the course of our life?
Yeah. Chanakya, he speaks about the Niti Shastras, speak about um, thirst or hunger, whatever you call it, in a very interesting way. So Chanakya says there are some things you should never be satisfied in life. That means you should have a constant hunger for these things in life. And there are some things you should always be satisfied in life. That means don't be so hungry for these things. Be peaceful. Be content. Be satisfied with these things. Let's just discuss that, right? So the three things that Chanakya says that you should never be satisfied with. First, never be satisfied with the amount of charity you give. Never think I'm giving so much. No, never be satisfied with it. Second thing, never be satisfied with the number of holy names you have chanted. That means never be satisfied with your prayer. Never say that I chant so much. You can't be satisfied with that. And third thing, never be satisfied with your study. That means how much ever knowledge you acquire, there is always a scope of acquiring more knowledge. The day you say, I have enough knowledge, that's the end of your learning. That's the end of literally your growing, basically. So these three things you should never be satisfied with. That means these three things you should be eternally hungry, thirsty for. Always be hungry for giving, always be hungry for knowledge, always be hungry for chanting the holy names for spiritual practices. And three things you should always be satisfied with. That means do not hanker, not have hunger for it. First thing is be satisfied with the resources that you have. That means whatever money you have and whatever resources you have at your disposal, learn to be satisfied with. Of course, it doesn't mean that you shouldn't have ambition. It just means that right now what you have, be satisfied with it. You can always grow. You can always gain more. That's not a problem. But while gaining also, just remember that at that point, whatever you have, be grateful for it. That's the first thing you should be satisfied with. The second thing, always be satisfied with your spouse. So whoever is your husband or wife, be satisfied. Basically, don't complain about relationships because you will never get perfect relationships. It will never happen that the ideal scenario that you're expecting will happen. Whatever you have, be satisfied with it. The third thing is always be satisfied with the quality of food that you eat. Unfortunately, we end up complaining about these three things so much, isn't it? Always complaining about the food that we're eating. Some defect or other that we keep finding, some flaw that we keep finding. Salt is less and sugar is more, and this and that, constantly. So the idea is these three things be satisfied with, and those three things never be satisfied with. So if your question is what should your thirst be, that's your answer.
This this third thing, Chanakya said the same thing. What to be not satisfied with? Again,
Yes,
Chanakya said,
yes.
uh,
In the Niti Shastras.
he's outdated. He's pretty outdated. I would agree with charity, holy names, and knowledge. But I
Correct.
don't somehow agree with the quality of food. I don't agree with the satisfaction of the spouse, because if he's hopeless, he has to be got rid of, he or she.
Yeah, yeah.
Rid of, rid of, let him go. Because why waste
Obviously,
your time? Why waste your energy on somebody who's not worth it? Or he or she, it could be either. And secondly, I agree with resources you have, because that brings you a sense of gratitude, but not with the wrong spouse, he or she, and not with the quality food, because that will give you a bad tummy.
yeah. So what
Or
it
no.
let me quantify what it really means. Basically,
Yeah,
at least is my understanding I can share.
yeah,
While I definitely agree that exploitative people cannot be lived with and should not be
exactly.
tolerated. I 100%
Exploitative,
agree.
yeah.
I absolutely agree on that. But what happens? The nature of the human mind is to always find faults with everyone, whether a person is exploitative or not. Right? So, I mean, extreme cases we definitely don't, we can't just keep quiet, and there's no doubt about that.
Yeah,
But this particularly is, I think, talking about the nature of constantly finding faults with everyone, whoever it is, basically. So that is where it leads to sourness in relationships.
that's right.
Unfortunately, that's what happens nowadays, and that's primarily the cause of so many relationship issues today.
That's right.
And of
I
course,
agree.
quality.
It's not
Yeah,
finding faults.
yeah.
If you are only looking for faults, then you get enough. But
That's
if you're
yeah.
looking for not
That's the
faults,
point.
then you also have enough. That
Correct.
I agree.
Yeah, yeah. I
It's your
think
nature.
that is the context in which this is being spoken.
Yeah, it's in that context one can read.
Yeah.
Shubhaji, how important in all this context is the word commitment? Because that's what I've gathered. The word commitment is such a pure word. What are you committed to? If you're committed to the self, then naturally you will take care of your heart, body, soul, mind, and you're committed to life. You're committed to living. Isn't that what he's truly saying? Contentment and commitment. Aren't those two very important words?
Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely. You're absolutely right because see the biggest commitment that you have is accountability to the Paramatma. Just to give you a simple example, when a surgeon is operating on operation table and he is doing his job. Now, who sees what is happening in an operation table? No one. So the only person that he is actually accountable to is God. When a teacher is teaching in a classroom, no matter how many surveys and systems you have of evaluating, but ultimately the reality is that the teacher only knows what he or she is doing. Nobody else will ever know, basically. So who is the teacher accountable to? Teacher is accountable to Paramatma within the heart. So a lot of us, almost every single job, every single occupation that one does in this world, um, ultimately, your commitment and accountability is to the Paramatma in your heart. No one else. can actually monitor you. No one else can absolutely find out what you're doing and what your commitment is, what level of depth of commitment it is. You can fool everybody else in the world very easily, but you can't fool the Paramatma within the heart. And that I think is the highest level of commitment that one should aspire for, and that is the highest level of commitment that one should even expect from others. And therefore, the Constitution of India, if you look at the book, the original Constitution of India, it is every single page has paintings from Ramayana and Mahabharata because it reminds us of our connection with Paramatma. It reminds us that our constitution strongly is uh, is centric around something deeper. It's centered around something much, much. In fact, almost every country, right? Most countries in this world are all centered around the existence of God. In US, if you look at the American currency, in God we trust. In every note, it is there. So we're trying to remind ourselves that our commitment is finally to the Paramatma within our own hearts.
Shubhaji, we all had a little light moment, but character truly is what you do when no one is watching. And what kind of a character do we want to develop for our own self is a personal choice. And we pray for a nation with people who have very, very strong moral characters. We pray. We pray for that kind of society and society. We pray for that kind of nation. Two little questions, then we cover the chapter, and then we request Mummy to give a little sum up. आपने बोला है emblem of saintliness is simplicity, और जीने का तरीका simplicity ही है. Emblem of wickedness is duplicity. Why duplicity, Shubhaji? Why can't we all be straightforward with our own self and others? Ji, Shubhaji.
Absolutely. Um, Unfortunately, today what happens is the idea of duplicity is mixed up by mistake, or rather, unfortunately, with the idea of diplomacy. There's a big difference between diplomacy and duplicity. Diplomacy is important and it's needed because you can't be a simpleton. People will take advantage of you. People will take you for a ride. So if you study the Mahabharata, Krishna was very diplomatic. He in fact coached the Pandavas to become diplomatic, and that is what resulted in their winning the war, literally, right? So diplomacy is very important, but duplicity means something completely different. Unfortunately, today, because people are confusing diplomacy with duplicity, they end up thinking it's okay to be duplicitous. Duplicity simply means that I am saying something else, but I actually mean something else. Diplomacy is a different way of saying something. You understand the difference between the two? Duplicity means I'm saying something, but I actually mean something else. Diplomacy means I'm saying this thing in a different way, just so that I get my point across. So diplomacy is encouraged. Duplicity is not. Because diplomacy simply shows you're smart. Duplicity shows you're crooked. Diplomacy means that you are looking for a win-win situation. And duplicity means you're looking to fool the other person. You're looking to cheat the other person. You're looking to completely, destroy the other person. So therefore, even with bad people, you don't behave duplicitous. What to speak of behaving duplicitous with good people? With bad people, you can behave diplomatic. That's fine, but you shouldn't behave duplicitous. because that is considered to be a very very bad way of living life and you know being absorbed in life. Does it make sense? What I said.
Yes, Shubhaji. Shubhaji, when someone is fooling someone, or someone thinks someone is fooling someone, who are they really fooling? They're actually fooling their own self. Can you really fool anybody in the karmic sense? You can't, because you've actually played a trick with your own karmic journey. Ji Shubhaji.
That is exactly why we spoke about the idea of accountability. In the ultimate sense, we are accountable to the Paramatma. The world might think anything, but finally, the Paramatma is the one that really uh, is the most powerful proof of you know your innocence or your simplicity or your truthfulness. There are some situations in life that history has seen it. So many historical situations where somebody who was absolutely innocent, alleged in a very very bad way, to do something. Now, when somebody is absolutely innocent and is alleged, now sometimes from a legal point of view also and from a logical point of view also, there's no way you can prove. Sometimes people have to wait for decades before being proved innocent from a legal point of view. But then, so many decades pass, so much of bad image comes in. But unfortunately, or rather fortunately, one person who never misunderstands us is God. When we are true to the in the eyes of God, when we are true in the eyes of the Paramatma within our hearts, eventually people will understand it. Initially, people may not understand, but eventually people will understand. And sometimes you just have to be patient and pray.
They know everything, Shubhaji.
Superb.
God knows everything. Mummy?
Superb.
Ji.
It's been an amazing, amazing discourse. Amazing.
Thank you. Thank you.
It's like been a guru shishya discourse. Saina has actually read the book carefully and been a very curious learner as a student. And you've been such a wonderful uh, expresser of clarity that you actually satisfied the student. Now, I have my summation, but since I have a very bright student with me, I would want him to contribute as he has looked at and summation. Then I'll come back. Come, Rahul. I'll move up a little and here. Come. Come, move up here. So Rahul was an intern with Rajnivas in Pondicherry, one of our very bright interns. So Rahul, go ahead. You're a student, and now, how have you read and felt? Go ahead, Rahul.
I feel it's an honor to actually imbibe this knowledge directly from you. So there has been much to learn and there's much to express at this moment. However, whatever I have analyzed, I'm very much excited and very much intrigued by the facts and the knowledge that I had gained with the stories regarding Kumbhakarna and various other stories in the Ramayana, including Kumbhakarna, Bhasmalochan, and as well as the discussion between Krishna and Arjun, which actually portrays something which is very much important in our lives. So the story which connected well with Bhasmalochan and with Kumbhakarna, let's say for example, how pride was something which actually can be very much dangerous for an individual, and how patience in a certain manner can change a course of can definitely change course of the time or the decision which has to be taken. So definitely this has been something which is very much unique to me and very much I have extremely learned something out of it.
Superb, Rahul.
Thank you.
And
Thank you,
here's
Raghav.
your law student, right? What are you doing?
No,
still?
I've completed my management from Shubha University.
So you just finished management, and what are you going to do next now?
I'm going to pursue with my father in his business. We're based out of Jaipur, and we produce uh, we produce industrial iron and road infrastructure. So I'm looking forward to be in that path and this business, and trying to imbibe more changes in that. So that definitely, as change is inevitable. So looking forward to that principle as well.
All
Good.
the best, Raghav.
Wonderful.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, Rahul. It was really a wonderful opportunity to have an intern returning to you to come back to me. It's very. So here are my summations. I've thoroughly enjoyed every bit of what Shubhu, Mr. Shubhu, you said it, but here are my summation and a quick summation. We got 5 minutes to go, so I'll stick to my 5 minutes. You began by saying that law of karma is closely connected to determination and intention. And you explained that when it hits hard. This is number one. Two, you said three factors are doers. One is the person, second is the laws of nature, and third is God's wish. These are the three doers. And of course, you said it's the Atma, the body, and the driver is the ultimate, is the God. This is how you explained it. But three factors, each one is actually a brilliant takeaway and it is ahead of actually a headline of a chapter. Third, you said, as Rahul also mentioned, that pride is the last snare, as you mentioned, and you need help of God to master or annihilate it. For this, you need God in front. And that's how he explained how Lord Rama came in front, the Vanars, to handle the war. Fourth, you said, greatest enemy and greatest friend is you, your own self. So, mirror is a reflection of your self image, high or low. That's your own imagination. Fifth, you said that the role mind is overwhelming, but is external. But mind is controlled by the intellect, and intellect is controlled by the soul, which is the Satchinanand. So if you really want to work on, look at your mind, make your intellect control it, and finally, soul, watch it. Watch even the intellect, which is the Satchinanand. Six, you said, why is more powerful? Why is more powerful than the how? Because once your why is clear, you can find many, many hows. Why empowers you? Why empowers you to achieve your goal? And goals are destinations, whereas why is the purpose. That's what you said. Then you said the natural way of life is slow. Take time. It will take its own time, and you brilliantly explain why does a child take, for a normal child delivery is 9 months, and if he or she is in a hurry, then what happens? Suffers for the rest of his life. So that's what you said. Point nine was loss of patience gives us no time to process. That's fact. When you are uh, in a hurry, your process is, and that's what happens. Shortcuts, lot of shortcuts. Patience gives us no time to process. Impatience, loss of patience gives us no time to process, and whereas process is so critical. And then you said, this is brilliant. You said, in some things you can be never satisfied, as Chanakya said, and that's where you and I had a little another viewpoint. One is charity, never get tired of charity, never get tired of chanting holy names, and never get tired of acquiring knowledge. You said this beautifully. Never get tired of giving, never get tired of chanting, remembering the good names of the Almighty, and never get tired of acquiring knowledge. Three things you said. And of course, what you get satisfied is where is a difference, a great, honest difference of opinion. But it's a matter of interpretation. 11th, commitment. Saina asked you a very good question. Commitment to whom? You said commitment to the Paramatma in your heart when nobody's watching. Character, when Saina very beautifully said, character is when no one is watching. And I think that's a very good takeaway for students in the youth of this country. If the youth of this country is all understanding that you are character when nobody's watching you, humanity would be different. At the moment, the humanity is functioning only when somebody's watching you under the law and looking at how do they protect themselves. But real character is when no one is watching. That was a great question. Um, and 13th point, you said the difference between diplomacy and duplicity. Diplomacy is a different way of saying, you said, and duplicity is cheating the other and pretending to what you're not. And last point, I think you very beautifully said is ultimate sense, we are accountable to the Paramatma. When we are true, we are fully understood. As Saina said, when we are true, ultimately you will be understood. So the ultimate success is you are accountable and Paramatma. When we are true, you will be understood. It's a matter of time. It's been one of the finest discourses I've heard from you, Shubhaji. So grateful to you.
Thank you very much. Very grateful, beautifully summing it, and for so enthusiastically absorbing it.
Very
Thank you.
well said. Such a learned discourse. And Sana has done justice to asking you some very right questions. And she continued to get the best out of you. And in the process, we are all, whoever have listened to this, are very big gainers. Thank you so much, Umaji.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Very grateful. Thank you, Saina ji.
जी शुभा जी, थैंक यू. इट्स ऑल मास कृपा शुभा जी. अगले महीने आपको मिलेंगे एक और चैप्टर के साथ. चैप्टर का टाइटल है डिसेप्शन एंड डिस्ट्रक्शन. इस पे एक बात बोलूंगी आपको जाते जाते. We all have the power to make a difference in all aspects of life and living. ये हमको तय करना है. What do we do with that power? तय करिए और आपको मिलेंगे अगले महीने. जय धारी माँ.
We'll be
जय
good together. Thank you.
हरे कृष्णा शुभा जी. जय
Thank you,
श्री
Shubhaji.
राम. जी
And thank you, Raghav.
जी, थैंक यू.
Thank you, Raghav. You come on.
राघव, बेस्ट विशेस.
Thank you, Raghav.
All the best, Raghav.
Yes.
Thank you so much, sir. It was great having you.
जी.
And
बेटा बेस्ट विशेस.
Thank you.
जय धारी माँ. हरे कृष्णा. जी.